Use a warm, empathetic tone. Emma sat quietly in her small flat in Manchester. The room was getting dark as evening came. She looked down at her phone in her hands. The music app had just started playing that song again. Her finger moved slowly toward the skip button. Her hand was shaking a little. It had been 3 long years now. 3 years since she could listen to Golden Days by the meadows without feeling like her heart was breaking into pieces. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. It was the summer when she was 21 years old. Her younger brother, James, had just turned 18. They were closer than they had ever been before. Emma had come home from university for the summer holidays. James was working at the small bookshop in their town called Millfield. It was a quiet place where everyone knew everyone else. Every day felt special that summer. After James finished his work at the bookshop, he would come to pick up Emma. They would get into their father's old blue car. The paint was fading and the seats were worn, but it was their favorite place to be. James would start the engine and they would drive out into the countryside. They always rolled the windows down so they could feel the warm summer air on their faces. They had made a special playlist together on James's phone. It had all their favorite songs on it. But Golden Days was always the first song they played. As soon as the music started, James would reach over and turn up the volume as loud as it would go. Then they would both start singing along. Neither of them could sing very well, but that did not matter. They would sing at the top of their voices until they were laughing so hard their sides hurt. One evening, James parked the car by the river that ran through Millfield. They sat on the hood of the car and watched the sun go down. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. Everything felt perfect and peaceful. "This is our song," James had said. Looking out at the water, "Promise me something. Promise me that whenever you hear it, you will remember this summer. Remember how perfect everything is right now." Emma had laughed and pushed his shoulder in a playful way. "Don't be so dramatic, James," she said with a smile. "We will have loads more summers like this one." But James was always the thoughtful one in the family, even though he was only 18. He seemed to understand things about life that Emma was still learning. He carried a small notebook with him everywhere he went. In it, he would write down quotes that he liked and little things he noticed about people. He wanted to be a writer someday. Maybe a journalist who would tell important stories. Emma was studying to be a primary school teacher. They both had such clear dreams back then. The future seemed bright and full of possibilities. Those really were golden days. Every evening, they would sit by the river or drive through the small villages near Millfield. They would spend hours talking about their futures and their hopes. They also talked about their fears. The silly worries that young people have. James was worried that he was not brave enough to be a real writer. He was afraid that his stories would not be good enough. Emma was worried that she was not patient enough to teach young children. She was scared that she might lose her temper or not know how to help them learn. But they always supported each other's dreams. They never doubted that the other person could do anything they set their mind to. "You are going to write stories that change people's lives," Emma would tell him whenever he felt worried. "I know you will, and I am going to teach kids to love reading," Emma would say. "So they can discover amazing writers like you." James would smile when she said things like that. He would write in his notebook and tell Emma that she already had the most important thing a teacher needed. She had a kind heart. The summer went by so quickly. The way summers always do when you're happy. Soon it was time for Emma to go back to Manchester for her final year at university. James was going to start his first year at the local college in Millfield. He was going to study English literature, which made him very excited. On the day Emma had to leave, James drove her to the train station. They both felt sad, but also excited about their new adventures. They hugged each other tightly on the platform. "Don't forget our song," James called out as the train started to pull away from the station. Emma smiled and waved at him through the window. She watched him get smaller and smaller as the train carried her away from Millfield. How could she ever forget their song? How could she forget those perfect golden days they had shared together? But now, 3 years later, sitting alone in her flat, Emma realized that forgetting was not the problem. The problem was remembering. The song brought back too much joy from a time that felt like it belonged to someone else, someone who did not know what was coming next. Use a warm, empathetic to Nelly phone call came on a grey October morning. The sky outside was dark with heavy clouds that looked like they might bring rain at any moment. Emma was sitting in her university library in Manchester. She had her books spread out on a wooden table near the window. She was working hard on her final teaching placement essays. These papers were very important for her degree. She needed to finish them soon. Her phone buzzed on the table next to her textbooks. When she looked at the screen, she saw her mother's name. Emma almost did not answer. Her mum rarely called during the day. Usually her mother waited until evening to phone and chat about their days. But something made Emma pick up the phone. "Emma, love." Her mother's voice sounded very strange. It was broken and shaky in a way Emma had never heard before. "You need to come home right away. There has been an accident." The words that came next seemed to float toward Emma from very far away. They did not feel real. James, car accident, Rainy Road, the hospital. Emma felt like she was listening to someone else's terrible story. This could not be happening to her family. Emma found herself standing up in the quiet library. Her legs felt weak and strange. She could not seem to make them work properly. All around her, other students kept reading their books and writing their essays. They acted like the world had not just stopped spinning. They acted like everything was still normal. But nothing would ever be normal again. The journey home to Millfield felt like it took forever. Emma sat on the train and stared out the window at the fields and small towns rushing past. She tried to make sense of what her mother had told her. James was only 18 years old. He was always so careful when he drove their father's car. He never went too fast or took risks. He was supposed to start university next year. He was supposed to write those stories that would change people's lives. This could not be happening. When Emma finally reached the hospital in the town near Millfield, she found her parents sitting in uncomfortable plastic chairs in a waiting room. The lights were too bright and everything smelled like cleaning products. Her mother and father were holding each other very tightly. Emma had never seen her father cry before. He was always the strong one in the family. He was steady and calm, no matter what happened. But now his eyes were red and his face was wet with tears. He looked like he was falling apart. That was when Emma knew. Even before the doctor came to talk to them with his gentle voice and careful words, she knew her little brother James was gone. He would never come home again. He would never write his stories, or go to university, or drive through the countryside singing their favorite songs. The next few days felt like a strange dream that would not end. Emma moved through them like she was walking underwater. Everything seemed slow and unclear. Relatives came to the house bringing flowers and food. Neighbors brought casseroles and offered to help with anything the family needed. Everyone meant well. They wanted to help and to say the right things, but their kind words felt empty to Emma. People kept saying things like he is in a better place now and God needed another angel and at least he did not suffer. Emma wanted to scream at them. She wanted to tell them that she did not care about any of those things. feelings. She just wanted her little brother back. She wanted to hear him laugh again. She wanted to sing badly with him in their father's old blue car. The funeral was on a Thursday afternoon. The little church in Millfield was completely full. Emma was surprised by how many people had come. James had only lived for 18 years. But he had touched so many lives in that short time. His English teacher from college stood up and spoke about the brilliant essays James had written. His boss from the bookshop talked about how kind James had always been to the customers, especially the elderly people who came in looking for help finding books. His friends from school shared funny stories that made people laugh even while they were crying. Then someone decided to play Golden Days as part of the service. Emma felt the first musical notes hit her like someone had punched her in the stomach. She could suddenly see James so clearly in her mind. He was sitting in the driver's seat of their father's old blue car. He was reaching over to turn up the volume with that special smile he always got when their song came on. She could hear his voice singing along. Not quite in tune, but full of happiness and life. The memories were too sharp and too painful. They cut into her heart like broken glass. She could not breathe properly. She had to get out of the church. Right away. Emma stood up quickly and stumbled toward the door. She pushed past people in the pews and rushed outside into the autumn sunshine. She sat down hard on a wooden bench in the churchyard. She pressed her hands over her ears as tightly as she could. But she could still hear the song floating through the old stone walls of the church. It was their song. The song that was supposed to remind her of perfect summer evenings and endless dreams for the future. Now, it just reminded her that James was gone forever. Use a warm, empathetic tone to along years passed by like a slow, grey river. Emma finished her degree at university and found a job teaching year to children at a primary school. The school was in a small town outside Liverpool. It was a nice place with friendly people, but Emma felt like a stranger there. She threw herself into her work with all the energy she had left. She would arrive at school early in the morning before any other teachers got there. She would stay late in the afternoon, long after the children had gone home. The children in her class loved Emma very much. They thought she was the best teacher in the whole school. She was always patient with them, even when they made mistakes or could not understand something right away. She made up creative lessons that helped them learn to read and write. She would draw pictures on the blackboard and tell them stories that made learning fun. But even though Emma looked like she was doing well on the outside, she felt empty on the inside. She felt like she was just going through the motions of living without really being alive. Every day was the same. She would get up, go to work, teach her lessons, come home, make dinner, and go to bed. Then she would do it all over again the next day. Emma had become very good at avoiding Golden Days. She knew exactly which radio stations might play the song. She would quickly change the station in her car if she heard music that sounded like it might be leading up to it. When she went shopping, she would leave stores right away if their background music seemed to be heading in a direction that worried her. She stopped going to pubs and restaurants with friends because someone might choose the song on the jukebox or it might come on over the speakers. Her life became smaller and smaller. Everything she did was built around avoiding 3 minutes and 42 seconds of music. She planned her days round not hearing those familiar notes that would bring back memories of James. Emma's friend Lucy from university tried hard to stay in touch with her. Lucy would send text messages that said things like, "Come out with us tonight, just for one drink. You never see anyone anymore." Lucy was worried about her old friend. She could tell that something was very wrong, but Emma always had an excuse ready. She would text back and say she was too tired from work, or she had lessons to plan for the next day. Sometimes she would say she was not feeling well and needed to rest. The real truth was that she could not risk hearing the song. She could not explain to anyone why a simple piece of music had such terrible power over her. How could she tell them that 3 minutes of a song could make her feel like her heart was breaking all of? Again, her parents worried about her too. Every week, Emma would call them on Sunday evening. During these phone calls, her mother and father would gently try to help her. They would suggest that she come home to Millfield for a weekend visit. They would ask if she was meeting new people in her new town. They wanted to know if she was making friends. But Emma would always change the subject. She would talk about her students instead. She would tell them about the funny things the children said or the art projects they were working on. She would talk about her lesson plans for the next week. She would talk about anything except herself and how she was really feeling. During one phone call that was particularly difficult, her mother said something that stayed with Emma for a long time. "James would not want you to stop living. Love," her mother said in a soft voice, "he would want you to be happy." Emma knew that her mother was completely right. James had always wanted the best for her. He had always encouraged her to chase her dreams and to live life fully. But knowing something in her head and feeling it in her heart were two very different things. How could she be happy when the person who had brought her the most joy in life was gone forever? How could she listen to their special song when it would mean singing along all by herself? The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening in March. The weather was starting to get warmer and the days were getting longer. Emma was having dinner with two of her colleagues from school. Their names were Sarah and David, and they were both very nice people. They had invited Emma to join them at a small Italian restaurant in the town center. For the first time in many months, Emma was actually enjoying herself. Sarah was telling a very funny story about her cat, who had somehow gotten stuck inside a kitchen cabinet. David was making everyone laugh by doing impressions of their headmaster, copying the way he walked and talked. Emma found herself laughing along with them. She felt almost like her old self again. Then the restaurant's background music changed, and Emma heard those familiar opening chords that she knew so well. Everything changed in an instant. She felt all the blood drain from her face. Her hands started shaking so badly she had to put down her fork. She could not breathe properly. Her chest felt tight and painful. Sarah and David were still laughing and talking, completely unaware that Emma's world was crashing down round her. She mumbled something about needing to use the bathroom and quickly got up from the table. Dr. Patricia Williams had the kindest eyes Emma had ever seen. When Emma first met her, she noticed right away how gentle the doctor's voice was. Her office at the counseling center felt like a safe place. It was warm and comfortable, with soft lighting that was not too bright. There were green plants sitting on the window sills that made the room feel alive and peaceful. Emma had been coming to see Dr. Williams for 3 months now, slowly. She was learning how to talk about James without completely falling apart every time. At first, Emma could barely say her brother's name out loud. When she tried to talk about him, she would start crying so hard that she could not speak. But Dr. Williams was very patient. She never rushed Emma or made her feel bad for crying. She would just sit quietly and wait until Emma was ready to try again. "Tell me about the song again," Dr. Williams said during one session in June. The summer weather was warm outside, and Emma could hear birds singing in the trees near the counseling center. "Not about how it makes you feel now, but about what it meant to you both before everything changed." Emma closed her eyes and tried to let herself remember the good times. It was still hard to do this, but it was getting a little easier with practice. "It was joy," she said after thinking for a moment. "Pure, simple joy. James would turn the volume up so loud in the car that we could probably hear it from a mile away. We would sing along like we were famous pop stars performing at Wembley Stadium in front of thousands of people. We were so silly and so happy. The song was not just music to us. It was like a symbol of our friendship, our dreams, and our belief that life was good and full of possibilities. And now, when you hear it, Dr. Williams asked gently. Emma's face became sad again. Now, it just reminds me that all that happiness is gone forever. It reminds me that I will never have that kind of pure joy again. I will never sing badly in the car with James again. Dr. Williams leaned forward slightly in her chair. She looked at Emma with those kind eyes. But Emma, is the happiness really gone forever? Or have you locked it away in a deep place because it has become mixed up with all the sadness? Emma had never thought about it in quite that way before, for 2 years. She had thought that avoiding the pain meant she had to avoid thinking about James altogether. She thought that if she did not let herself remember the good times, then she would not have to feel the terrible sadness of losing him. But Dr. Williams was helping her understand something important. Grief and love were not opposite. Things that could not exist together. They were actually two sides of the same coin. You could not have one without the other. What if, Dr. Williams said in a gentle way, instead of the song representing loss and sadness, it could represent connection, not the connection that you have lost, but the connection that still exists in your heart right now. This was a very scary thought for Emma. She had spent 2 whole years building thick walls round that song and round those memories. The idea of choosing to listen and to golden days from purpose felt completely impossible. It felt like jumping off a cliff. But Dr. Williams was very patient with Emma. She understood that healing takes time and cannot be rushed. They decided to start with very small steps. Emma began by looking at old photographs of James again. At first, this made her cry, but after a while, she found that she could look at his smiling face without falling apart. Then Emma visited James's favorite bookshop in Millfield. She walked through the aisles where he used to work, touching the books that he had ranged on the shelves. The shop owner remembered James and told Emma stories about what a good worker he had been and how much the customers had liked him. Emma even sat in their father's old blue car, which her parents had kept in the garage all this time. They had not been able to bring themselves to sell it. Emma sat in the driver's seat where James used to sit and tried to remember how it felt to drive through the countryside with the windows down and the music playing loud. One day, when Emma was visiting her parents in Millfield, she went into James's old bedroom. Her mother had kept everything exactly the way James had left it. His clothes were still in the wardrobe. His books were still on the shelves. His desk still had his pens and papers scattered across it. Emma found James's small notebook lying on the bedside table. She picked it up with shaking hands. The notebook was filled with James's neat handwriting. There were quotes that he had collected from books and movies. There were ideas for stories that he wanted to write someday. There were little observations about life in their small town of Millfield. On one of the last pages, Emma found something that made her heart stop. It was an entry from that perfect summer 2 years ago. James had written, "Perfect evening with him tonight. We drove out to the river and listened to our playlist. When golden days came on, I thought to myself, this is exactly what happiness feels like. Not just the big exciting moments in life, but these quiet, simple times with the people who really understand you. I hope Em knows how much these summer drives mean to me. I hope she knows that even when we are both old and living completely different lives, I will always remember singing badly in Dad's car and laughing until we could not breathe anymore." Emma sat down on James's bed, holding the notebook carefully in her hands. She started to cry, But something was different this time. For the first time in 2 years, she was not crying only because she was sad. She was also crying because she felt love and gratitude. She was grateful that she had experienced something so beautiful with James, even if it was over now. "I think I am ready," she told Dr. Williams during their session the following week. "I think I am ready to listen to our song." Use a warm, empathetic tone the first time Emma listened to Golden Days after 2 years of complete silence. She was sitting in Dr. Williams's office. There was a box of soft tissues on the small table next to her chair. Her heart was beating very fast, like it was trying to run away from her chest. Dr. Williams had offered to stay with Emma while she listened to the song. Emma was very grateful that she did not have to do this alone. Dr. Williams pressed play on the small music player. The opening chords filled the quiet room, and Emma felt the familiar panic start to rise up in her chest like a wave. Her hands began to shake and her breathing became quick and shallow. Every part of her wanted to run away or ask Dr. Williams to turn off the music right away. But this time, instead of running away like she had done so many times before, Emma forced herself to breathe deeply and stay in her chair. She closed her eyes and let herself remember James's voice singing along to this song. His voice had always been slightly off-key, but it was full of life and happiness. She let herself remember the feeling of warm wind in her hair as they drove through the beautiful countryside round Millfield. She let herself remember how much they had loved each other. When the song finally ended, Emma was crying. Tears were running down her face, and she was holding tissues in both hands. But she had listened to every single note of the song, for the first time in 2 long years. She had chosen to remember the joy and the love instead of focusing only on the terrible loss. "How do you feel right now?" Dr. Williams asked in a gentle voice. Emma sat quietly for a moment, thinking about the question. "Sad," she said honestly. "But also something else. I feel grateful that James and I had that special time together. Grateful that we found a song that meant so much to both of us. It was not easy at first. Emma had to work very hard to retrain her brain. For 2 years, her mind had connected this song only with pain and sadness. Now she had to teach it to connect the song with love and happy memories instead. Some days were much harder than others, but slowly, little by little, she began to hear James's laughter in the melody instead of only hearing silence and emptiness. 6 months later, Emma made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her, including herself. She decided to apply for a teaching job at a primary school back in Millfield. She wanted to move back to her hometown. She wanted to be closer to her parents again. She wanted to be closer to all the places where she and James had been so happy together. "Are you completely sure about this, love?" her mother asked when Emma told her about the job. "Will it not be too difficult for you, being back in the place where everything happened?" Emma smiled at her mother. It was the first real smile her mother had seen on Emma's face in a very long time. "Mum, I have learned something very important over these past few months," Emma said. "Running away from the places and things that remind me of James does not make the pain go away. It just makes all the love go away too. I want to be somewhere that celebrates James's memory, not somewhere that hides from it." On Emma's first day teaching at Millfield Primary School, she decided to create a special reading corner in her new classroom. She filled it with soft, comfortable cushions and bright colors. She hung strings of tiny fairy lights from the walls to make it feel magical and cozy. She put up a small wooden sign that read, "Every child has a story worth telling." This was something that James had written in his notebook during that last summer they had spent together. Emma also began volunteering at the local library in Millfield. She helped to run a creative writing group for teenagers who wanted to learn how to write stories and poems. She shared James's deep love of words and stories with these young people. She encouraged them to find their own voices and to write about the things that mattered to them, just as James had been learning to do when his life was cut short. One evening, Emma was driving home from the library after the writing group had finished. The sun was starting to set, and the sky was turning beautiful shades of orange and pink. Suddenly, Golden Days came on the radio in her car. Instead of quickly changing the station like she had done so many times before, Emma reached over and turned up the volume. She drove through the same countryside roads where she and James had spent those perfect summer evenings 2 years ago, and she sang along with the music. Her voice was older now than it had been back then. It was perhaps a little sadder too, but it was still her voice, and somehow, in that magical moment, it felt like James was sitting right there in the car next to her, singing along with her just like he used to do. When the song ended, Emma pulled her car over to the side of the road. She parked in the exact same spot by the river where she and James used to come and watch the sunset together. She sat in the car for a few quiet minutes, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. The sky was painted in shades of gold and pink that were so beautiful. They almost did not look real. Emma thought about James's dream of becoming a writer. She thought about how, in a way, his story was still being told every single day. It was being told through her work with the young writers at the library. It was being told through the love that she and James had shared. It was being told through the way his kindness and gentleness continued to spread out into the world like ripples on a pond. "Thank you, James," Emma whispered softly to the evening air. "Thank you for teaching me that love does not end when someone dies. It just changes into a different shape." The end.